field. So I'm not too worried about it taking a lot of time to harvest. I mean, as it is, I've got 5 arable fields set up, 2 grass fields, and none of the arable fields are going to ripen at the same time, except the 2 soybean fields which were planted on the same day. But the canola will be ripe probably by late summer, and I don't expect the oats to be ready until early fall. The sunflowers early fall to mid-fall, I think, and then the soybeans will not be ready until late fall, early winter, which means we might lose them. And that'll be an annoyance, because I could do with the income. But because the harvest is spread out so much, I'm not too worried about not having a big harvester, because I need to get the fields harvested quickly right now. We're still going to be contending with the weather, but as we build up the number of fields, Lord Folds, we started with 10 fields, of which 2 were grass. Well, 1 was supposed to be arable, but I replanted as grass in the first year. But we had 8 arable fields, so it was paramount to get those fields harvested as quickly as possible. So the bigger the harvester, the better. And we may have similar issues later on as we increase the number of fields. A lot of folds, I think we ended up with about 18 to 20 fields, and at that point now you are starting to consider getting a second harvester, because your harvesting window is so tight, especially with the bad weather. As I said, we should be able to get away with a sort of a mid-sized harvester without too much pressure, at least for the first and second year, but eventually we are going to want big harvesters, especially if we get that field across the road. That's an expensive field, but that's going to take a day to harvest on its own, quite possibly. Most of the fields around our farm are actually grass fields. And I really don't want to spend all my time doing grass silage like this. And the 2 grass fields we have are nicely split for when they're ready to cut. So I'm not spending an entire day cutting grass, growing grass, hauling grass. It's something that's done every couple of days, which is nice for this year. Next year it's not going to be quite so easy, because all the grass is going to grow at the same, from the same start, at the same speed. Probably going to need a blade for this as well. Back on the subject of YouTube videos, I have seen UK silage. They were foraging corn and using the little where was it? These sorts of tippers to haul it back to the yard. So 21,000, 25,000 litre tippers to haul it back to the yard. But once they got back to the yard, they would just tip the chaff right at the entrance here, and then they had a wheel loader which would push it all into the silage bunker. So you weren't driving your equipment into the silage bunker and tipping, you were just tipping short, and then wheel loader would do the heavy lifting and pushing and compacting and stuff. I should have bought a blade for this. What it is, we'll probably have to go back to the store and get another again. Or we could call them and get it delivered. It does have a very nice turn circle on it though. Every time I come down that lane and turn into this field, I always think, oh, I'm going to hit that fence post. But I haven't yet. Really don't want to have to use the other bunker. Because it takes 2 game days to cook this stuff. It's going to be day 5 before this will be silage and we can sell it as silage. At the moment it's no value whatsoever. But if I can brew it in 2 days, that should mean that that bunker can remain empty for 4 days before the next round of silage needs to go in it. Problem is I don't think I've got 4 days or 2 days until field 3 is ready to cut. And I'd like to be able to keep the silage production running without taking a break. I've got nowhere to store it. That was the problem we had on Law Fields. There was only one bunker, and I would fill that up with over 1 million litres of chaff, brew it up, and then use that as a supply of silage for the cows, because it was right by the cow shed. But that meant for the next year or 2, all of the silage had to be hauled down to the BGA, and that's, like this map, a long trip to the BGA. And this BGA doesn't have any silage clamps unless I use placeable to put them in there. So that's going to be an issue. Definite goal on this map is to use as much natural fertiliser as we can, like we did on Lawfolds. So I am pushing for silage production, not at the moment, because it's worth money and we kind of need some to be able to afford the equipment we're going to need towards the end of the year. Okay, that should be fine. Oh no, it's still loading. Oops. think I had a 50,000 litre forage wagon in Oakfield as well, so again, big equipment, not typical of the UK or Europe in general. Could open that side gate there. I think someone was talking about tractors earlier. I do prefer a rigid framed tractor, so something like this. Generally over a tracked unit, like the larger Challengers, or a flexible frame like the Steiger Case 4 track. They're difficult. I find them difficult to drive. I like the Zerion because it's a rigid frame with four-wheel steering. This is a rigid frame with a lot of horsepower, so also good. Now will be, once we're past summer and all of our fields have been fertilised and herbicided and whatever else, articulated, that's the one. And good morning, Kivan, and welcome to the stream. I knew there was a technical word for it, I just didn't remember what it was. But yeah, what was I saying? I'll be putting regular wheels back on the Valtra, so I can use it for more general use tasks. At the moment it's dedicated spraying. I'm not going to take the sprayer off until all of the spraying work is done on this farm for this year. I am much better than I was. I don't know if you know, we bought a new house and previous owner had cats, and cats left dandering the carpet. I had a major allergic reaction, breathing, asthma type issues when we moved in. So we ripped out the carpets, replaced them with wooden floors, which made my breathing even more problematic. But we now have wooden floors throughout the house, and my breathing is slowly but surely recovering, barring anyone turning up and giving me coronavirus. I've been self-isolating myself because of my breathing issues, and that's close to being at an end, although obviously with the world in the state it's in at the moment, we're still all self-isolating, so come back here. I'm really making a mess of this. No, backwards is good. We can get this reversed up this precarious side of this mountain, and this is why you don't tip into it. Into a silage bunker, you use a front loader to push it in. Ooh, there we go. And eventually we will have a front loader in order to facilitate that. But for right now we're running on cheap. I've also got a supply of silage down at the BGA anyway in wrapped bales. Except at the moment it's wrapped grass, so we will be selling that possibly in another 36 hours or so, possibly. Maybe 24, maybe closer to 24. But, I can't sell that at the moment because, as I said, it's treated as wrapped grass until it's had time to brew for 2 days. We're playing 6-day seasons, so 2 days to make silage. And with seasons running, grass is worthless. Yeah, I'm kind of trying to do that, but it's... It's going to be easier to see under the tree. It's not very easy. There goes the Battle of Britain flight. When I lived in England, they flew over my house once. I lived about 15 miles north of an airfield that wasn't used for much of anything except local farmers market and 2 air shows per year. And so I'm in my kitchen washing dishes with the windows open because it's hot. There is nothing in the world that sounds like a Merlin engine. Well, nothing else in the world that sounds like a Merlin engine flying overhead. And sort of, you hear it for the first time and it's sort of, what is that? Looked out the window, Spitfire Lancaster and Hurricane in formation heading for the airfield. Ah, yes. It's an air show this weekend. But, yeah. I also lived on the flight path to one of the airports near London, and the airport I lived at wasn't... Concorde flew out of Heathrow, always, but when there was bad weather at Heathrow, the airport that I lived close to, still about 25 miles away from it, was the designated emergency landing for Concorde. So I was sat at home watching TV one afternoon. I looked out the window and said, well, it's definitely an aeroplane, but I have never seen an aeroplane with that profile. And obviously it was Concorde in a tight turn to come onto final for the runway. Most of the planes used to fly well north of where I lived because they didn't need the long run in. But Concorde needed a very long approach. And so I was sort of looking at it thinking, what the heck is that? Because I've never seen anything that looks like that before. And it turned out to be Concorde. Flew over my house, and later on one of my colleagues had one of my future colleagues had been working at that particular airport, on that day, and he said, yeah, Concorde came in, they landed, taxied to the gate, unloaded all the passengers, and they parked it off on one side of the field because obviously nothing's scheduled for Concorde to take off from the field. It's just an emergency landing for when it was unable to land at Heathrow. So it parks up till the following morning. And he said, they're in the office, and I think he said one of the guys noticed that it was out at the end of the runway and alerted a few people, but he said when that thing opens its engines up, all of the windows in the office just shook. And it took off down the runway, and exit vector took it straight over the long stay car parking lot, and every car in the parking lot, their alarm went off, and I'm not sure how many of them came home from their vacations to find couldn't start their cars because the battery was flat. The other time I saw Concorde up close flying was visiting a friend in East London, close to on the exit vector from Heathrow. He was landing over London, down towards Heathrow, and very, very graceful looking white silhouette in the night sky. You couldn't see it far, but it flew straight overhead, and no mistaking the silhouette of that plane flying over. But because she's landing, engines are idling. And I've been up to, I can't remember what the airfield is. There's a military air museum on an old airfield up near Cambridge, and they have a Concorde park there that you can climb the steps, go in at the front, walk down the passenger cabin, and exit at the back. And there is no way you would get me on that plane to fly in it because it's smaller than a Greyhound bus. It probably isn't, but the windows are tiny. It's very, very claustrophobic. I'm 6 feet tall, and you're sort of barely able to stand up as you walk down the aisle. Again, incredible piece of technology. Apparently British Airways bought each one for $1 or £1 because it was sponsored by the British government. And run as a loss leader for most of its life because it was a prestige thing. When I was learning to fly back in the UK, I met we'd gone up flying and finished my lesson for the day, and so the airfield had a small bar, and went in there for a snack and a drink, and talking to a couple of guys there, and one of them was a British Airways pilot, and he was senior enough that they offered him pilot on a Concorde, and he declined. And the reason was pilots are paid for the time they fly. And he flew, being that senior, he flew the wide-bodied 747s across the Atlantic, and that's a day job. 8 hours out, and you fly back the next day, 8 hours back. And he got paid by the hour, so he made quite a nice salary. Now, Concorde was a premium salary. So he'd have got a pay raise for being a Concorde pilot. But he said the problem was Concorde crossed the Atlantic in a matter of hours, and the effect would have been he'd have taken a pay cut to fly it. He got paid more per hour, but would fly fewer hours because of the length of time difference it takes for Concorde to fly across the Atlantic than it does for a 747. I don't know if he regretted it at all. It's the only time I ever met the guy. I'm not sure whether he regretted not having had the chance. He had the chance to fly it and he turned it down. But for his family, it made sense for him to stick with his current position. Again. So, how many more trips have we got to do on this field? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Potentially 9 more trips. This is going to take a while. I did say it was going to take a while when we started. Although the end of the field are not full rows, so still means a lot. Almost coming up to midday. So I'll strip another 2,000 litres thereabouts off the headland. Oh, that's it. For the most part, I'm getting most of this. Something I've been keeping an eye on is Vehicle Inspector mod, which on FS19 was called Glance. Glance would actually tell you how much silage was in a bike. I don't think the Vehicle Inspection mod does that. Tells you what tractors or what vehicles are currently moving and who's driving them. Very handy for a multiplayer. Or where you're using lots of workers, you can see how full your harvester is, when you're going to need to fill up the seeder and stuff like that. straight after this.